Thanks for stopping in today. I'm going to be talking with Noah Baxter, a middle school pastor in Northern California. We're going to be discussing the topic of doubt. How do we address our own doubts? Is there room in the church for doubters today? Well, welcome to the program, Noah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What are you seeing with middle schoolers and the subject of doubt as you work in youth ministry?
Yeah. I think with middle schoolers, it's interesting because they're so engulfed, most of them, in social media and culture and the things that are being thrown at them from there. So there's all kinds of different perspectives and worldviews and things being thrown at them. And especially if they don't have if they're not growing up in a Christian home or a healthy home, it's going to be even heavier. And then they're going to school, interacting with kids who have the same things, and it's popular to have these different ideas and beliefs. And so we have tons of kids that are coming to our services that is the center of their world. Jesus isn't the core worldview necessarily at their center. And so it's interesting because they will come in. I use one girl as an example. She hadn't been coming to youth at all. She'd been there a few times because she was coming with a friend, and that friend, great family. They're growing up Christian, all that stuff. But this girl, rarely been to church, kind of a traumatic background. Well, she shows up one Sunday morning, and we've been doing a series giving some Christian worldview information about suffering and how to handle the issue of suffering as Christians. And I'm doing kind of a review of that message and some different messages that we did throughout the series. And she just brings this onslaught of questions that, I'm sure maybe she's heard on social media. I'm sure that she's heard from her friends. And if not those things, she's definitely asked within herself. And they were questions that I think many of us have asked, or have, even if not externally, we've asked them internally, like, why do bad things happen to good people? Where is God when bad things are happening? Whether it's in the world or in their lives, what's God up to? Is he just sitting up there watching? And it's these honest questions that can often, for some reason, they seem threatening to us at first.
Mm-hmm.
But she asked these onslaught of questions, and I was just taking them all in one at a time, answering them, looking her in the eye, thanking her for asking those questions, because I know that there are questions that so many of them are thinking. The name of our series was Burning Questions. And what I actually did was have them write down things that they wanted to know about God and kind of submit them. And then I formed messages based off of those questions.
Great idea.
Yeah. So right off the bat, I was like, okay, I know y'all got questions, so I want to give space for that. And so I left some space for that. And this girl, and she's, visibly even upset, because these questions, you could tell she was wrestling with them on a deep level. And that's something I think that happens at such a young age, especially now, because of all the stuff that's constantly in their face. And especially when you grow up with a traumatic background, sometimes you're forced to face a lot of that stuff head on earlier than usual, and you kind of, your development is shoved forward in a way. And so she's asking all these heavy questions. I'm taking them one by one. I'm looking her in the eye. I'm thanking her, and by the end, she was like super thankful. She came up and gave me a hug, and I asked her to come on Wednesday, because it was a Sunday, and I asked her, hey, you should come on Wednesday. And she's like, okay, I'll see if I can. Well, she started coming consistently. She would start inviting other people that also didn't know Jesus. And so she's coming to church with all her questions, with all this stuff wrestling inside. And we have these kids that and that don't follow a Christian worldview, but we have them in church finding out about Jesus. We need to make the space for them to have those questions, and even to not have the impulse to try to give easy, quick answers and do a deep theological dive, because their questions span even like, intense topics and controversial topics. And I think what I've been seeing that really works is letting them come with all of that, not trying to fix them or get rid of the doubt or get rid of the questions, but leave a completely open space for them to come as they are. And then honestly to ask the question like, God, what are you doing with them? I think a lot of times we feel the pressure to try to fix kids and give solutions and change their story, instead of receiving them as they are, meeting them where they're at, loving them there, planting seeds, and trusting that the Lord is going to water it. The Lord is going to grow it. The Lord is actually going to walk them through that process. We had this training a while back where um, we had someone come in and they talked a lot about their experience with ministry. And one of the things that they said was, one of the ways that you know that you're leading these kids well and you're succeeding in youth ministry is when they don't need you anymore, because they just go to Jesus, because you've showed them how to go to Jesus with their questions
Yeah.
and with their wrestling.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if we don't give space for that and we just try to answer and fix it and make their doubt go away, we're actually not getting them to Jesus. We're just getting them to answers. And answers aren't, a lot of times those questions are born out of pain, born out of hurt, and these deep identity things that they're wrestling with. And if we don't see those as an opportunity to get them to Jesus, who can form them and transform them through those questions, then I think we miss an opportunity.
So this is really a different posture for the church, isn't it? Um,
Mm,
Historically, the church hasn't necessarily welcomed the doubter
mm,
or known how to do it well.
mhm.
So we're also facing the fact that many kids who have been raised in the Christian culture
Yeah,
are in a period of doubting right now.
yeah,
So speak to that for a minute.
yeah. I think my age group, especially, and a little bit older than me, are big into the the doubt deconstruction stuff. Uh, and I think it's largely because they didn't feel like their questions were welcomed. And it's so interesting because I think those questions, if the church had welcomed them, or has welcomed them, we would see it a lot differently. We would see the response happening a lot differently. I think the reason it's become a movement separate often from the church itself,
Mm-hmm.
um, is because those questions weren't welcomed. And so they went to find people who were asking the same questions that they were, that they felt were silenced, or that they never felt the space to ask. So they found their own space where those questions were safe. And often it's resulted in pointing fingers at the church, because they felt like you never gave space for me in these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I've perceived is that a lot of people that are in that space have a view towards the church that it's obviously critical, but I think it's also this view that the church is following blindly and naively, because they felt like, are you kidding me? You're not asking all these questions that I'm asking, because these are questions that I don't think most of the time they're rooted in just this desire to challenge and doubt and push against the norm. I think they're questions that are from an honest, hurt place, just like these questions that the junior hires are asking. And so, they've found a community that has accepted these questions, And like humanity often does, it becomes an us versus them kind of thing. And they've created their own branch off, is what it feels like to me. um and yeah, I think the church can do a lot better job at receiving them. I think we could give space for those questions. I mean, even me, I grew up in church. I grew up, and I've seen friends of mine that I went to college with go into the whole deconstruction mode, that I've seen were on fire for Jesus and love Jesus. And what I've noticed is that most of those people, they still love Jesus. It's
How
it,
interesting.
they Yeah, it is interesting. I think we assume that, like, oh, they don't even believe in God anymore because they're asking these hard questions. But many of them are still enamored by and moved by Jesus and the life that he lived. Uh, and they just see this tension because they're like, all these questions that they're looking at the life of Jesus, and then they're looking at the church, and they're asking these questions because they see some differences. And that then all of a sudden it's felt like an attack on them, like, oh, you don't even believe in God and believe in Jesus anymore. They're like, no, I'm just asking questions. And I think the more we push back against it, it's going to create further and further divide. I think if we actually gave space for those questions, it would actually give us the ability to transform and grow. And I think it's, again, just like these junior hires, it's an invitation to know Jesus deeper and to become more like him. I think the problem is we're often afraid.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
I grew up in church, and I went to college, and um, my beliefs were challenged like crazy. I think I had the benefit of having a good foundation, that also taught me, to not just go along with what everybody said, but to think critically. And so I would take these questions in, and things about the Bible and about God that I was like, whoa, that's crazy. I've never heard that before. That shatters my entire universe. But I would take them, weigh it against what I grew up with, weigh it against how I viewed scripture. I would investigate it, not just believe it right off. And it formed me in deeper and greater ways. And I came to know and love Jesus deeper. Um, and I think I've definitely faced my own waves of sort of deconstruction and doubt. The difference is I've always loved and valued church, even when I've had critical views toward it. I've always loved and valued it, and so I've stayed in it, uh, because and maybe it's just my experience has been different. Maybe I've been in circles where I felt like the questions were okay, and I felt like the questions were like okay to be wrestled with, and that's just probably the blessing of growing up. And just, I mean, throughout my experience in college, I felt like the questions were invited. Even my experience here at the Stirring, I feel like my questions have been invited. So maybe that's just my own experience, but yeah, I think that can make all the difference in the world if we invite those questions. Because for me, even though I've had these phases of doubt, and honestly, to the point where I've had to go back to a lot of the things that I originally believed that felt deconstructed. There were things that I had to change, and there's things that I've had to go back to, because I mean, for me, there's been things like spiritual warfare that the more I got like head and logical stuff, I was like, I don't know about all that. It's probably not that. But as I, have engaged in ministry a lot more and just gone on with my life, I've experienced it like in heavy ways. Um, and to to not have a biblical view on spiritual warfare and things like that, well, I guess it was still a lens of biblical worldview, but the one that I was kind of taking on just did not fit with what I felt like I was experiencing, and it didn't give me hope or anything like that.
Hmm.
And so I've had to come back to some of it, and then I've had so many things that have changed. And yeah, I think that's having the open space to wrestle with it has actually helped me become who I am today.
So, Noah, thank you so much for taking the time for this conversation today. And we're going to continue. I should just let people know that are watching. We're going to continue to talk about doubt in at least one other episode here. So I look forward to having you back on again.
Yeah, thank you.